Here is the paradox. Both countries say they want a deal. Both leaders have agreed to meet in May. Curious. And yet, in the past 2 weeks, both Washington and Beijing have launched formal legal investigations against each other. Investigations that, if completed, could justify new tariffs, new bans, new walls between the world's 2 largest economies. If this looks like 2 negotiators walking toward the table while pointing guns at each other, that is because it is. Pause. And the question nobody in the mainstream press is asking is, who actually gets hurt when they fire? Here is the paradox. Both countries say they want a deal. Both leaders have agreed to meet in May. Curious. And yet, in the past 2 weeks, both Washington and Beijing have launched formal legal investigations against each other. Investigations that, if completed, could justify new tariffs, new bans, new walls between the world's 2 largest economies. If this looks like 2 negotiators walking toward the table while pointing guns at each other, that is because it is. Size. And the question nobody in the mainstream press is asking is, who actually gets hurt when they fire? My argument is this. What looks like an escalation is actually a highly choreographed performance of pressure, and the audience it is designed to impress is not the other superpower, but their own domestic constituencies and the rest of the world. Thoughtful. The real, unintended casualties of this performance are sitting in Sao Paulo, Bogota, Santiago, and Mexico City. Let us start with the contract that broke. In February 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a central pillar of Donald Trump's tariff framework, the broad duties he had imposed using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a 1977 law that gives the president sweeping authority in national emergencies. Surprised, the court ruled he had overstepped. Triple-digit tariffs against China, which had briefly sent the trade relationship into what one analyst called a controlled implosion, were suddenly invalidated. Trump needed a new legal foundation. Thoughtful, so he went back to a tool from the first trade war. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. Section 301 allows the U.S. Trade Representative to investigate and penalize countries engaged in unfair trade practices. The investigations take time, months. But they produce legally durable tariffs. Trump launched 2. One targeting industrial overcapacity and government subsidies across 16 trading partners, China prominently among them. A second targeting dozens of countries over alleged use of forced labor in manufacturing. The clock started ticking. Beijing's response, announced on March 27, 2026, was a direct mirror. China's Ministry of Commerce opened 2 investigations of its own. One examines U.S. policies that restrict Chinese goods from entering American markets and limit U.S. exports of advanced technology, semiconductors, artificial intelligence hardware, to China. The second targets barriers to Chinese green energy exports. The ministry described these actions as safeguarding the interests of Chinese industries and expressed, in its words, firm opposition to the American probes. The probes carry a 6-month window that can be extended to 9. That timeline is not accidental. It places their conclusion well after the planned Trump-Xi summit on May 14th and 15th in Beijing. And here is what almost no one is reporting. Beijing's demands going into the summit are already on the table. According to reporting from Prism News and Size's China Power Project, Beijing wants Washington to loosen technology controls on semiconductors and AI, remove sanctions against more than 1,000 Chinese firms, and reduce restrictions on Chinese direct investment in the United States. Washington, for its part, wants China to stop what it calls overcapacity dumping, flooding global markets with subsidized goods in steel, solar panels, electric vehicles, and to enforce bans on goods made with forced labor. These are not positions that close easily in a 2-day summit, which means both sides arrived at this moment knowing the investigations would outlive whatever is agreed in May. This is the part where the historian in me has to be direct. Both sets of investigations are, in a very real sense, theater. They are legal instruments deployed to generate leverage, bargaining chips, as multiple analysts and former officials have described them. The investigations themselves may never produce final rulings. In the 2018 to 2020 trade war cycle, Section 301 tariffs were imposed, then partially suspended, then renegotiated in the Phase 1 deal of January 2020, a deal that China never fully fulfilled, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. which tracked compliance through 2022. A size survey of 79 former officials and China experts found that only 3% believed both sides would keep all their commitments in 2026. 3%. And yet both governments are investing enormous legal and diplomatic energy into a process most insiders expect to be partially walked back. So why do it? Because the domestic audience demands it. Trump cannot go to Beijing looking like he is negotiating from weakness after the Supreme Court invalidated his tariffs. He needs the Section 301 investigations as proof that he is still in the driver's seat. Xi Jinping cannot sit across from an American president without having put something on the table first. China's own investigations signal to the Chinese public and to the global South that Beijing does not absorb American pressure, it responds to it. This is what I mean by theater. The audience is not each other. It is the voters in Ohio and the citizens of Chongqing. It is the governments in Berlin, Brasilia, and Jakarta watching to see who blinks. What do we actually know as of today, March 31st, 2026? Curious. The Trump-Xi summit has already been delayed once. Trump asked Beijing to push it back a month or so because of the U.S. war against Iran, which has largely shut down the Strait of Hormuz and sent global oil prices surging. That war is now bleeding into the summit's agenda. Trump has publicly asked China, which sources roughly 90% of its oil through the strait, to help pressure Iran to reopen the waterway. Frustrated, China has condemned the war and shows no sign of cooperating on that front. So the two leaders will sit down in May carrying a list of grievances that now includes trade investigations, technology controls, Iran, oil, Taiwan, and the future of the Panama Canal, where a BlackRock-led consortium is attempting to buy C.K. Hutchison's port assets over Beijing's objections. Every actor in this story faces a version of the same dilemma. What do you give up to get what you want most? Thoughtful. For Washington, the dilemma is this: accept Chinese green energy dominance in exchange for access to Chinese markets, or maintain the technology blockade and lose the summit entirely. For Beijing, it is the inverse. Offer concessions on industrial policy to get semiconductor restrictions lifted, or hold firm, risk escalation, and watch the 6-month pro clock run out. Pause for the rest of the world, for the governments watching from the sideline. The dilemma is quieter but no less real. Align with Washington and accept the political cost with China, or keep both doors open and risk being squeezed from both sides. For scenarios are plausible from here. First, the summit produces a limited agreement, a Phase 2 deal with specific carve-outs on technology and green energy, both sets of investigations paused in exchange. Markets stabilize temporarily. Curious. Second, the summit collapses or is further delayed. The Iran war escalates. Trump stays in Washington, and both sets of investigations continue toward their conclusions. Third, a cosmetic deal. Both sides declare victory. Nothing is structurally resolved, and the investigations are quietly shelved for 18 months while both governments tend to domestic politics. Size, fourth, the one that gets the least coverage. The summit happens, a deal is signed, and the unintended consequences hit everywhere else. Lower commodity prices as Chinese overcapacity continues flowing into third markets, more currency pressure on export economies, and a new set of rules that Latin American countries had no hand in writing but will be required to follow. If you are sitting in Colombia, in Brazil, in Chile, or in Peru right now, and you feel that the trade war is something that happens on the other side of the world to other people, challenging, I want to challenge that assumption. China is the largest trading partner for Brazil, Chile, and Peru. It is the destination for a significant share of the copper, soybeans, iron ore, and lithium that these economies depend on to fund their governments and employ their people. According to the International Institute for Sustainable Development, a severe slowdown in Chinese demand triggered by this escalation could significantly depress regional growth and commodity prices, not because of anything that Latin America did, but because of a contract dispute between Washington and Beijing that Latin American governments had absolutely no role in shaping. Concerned, this is the unintended consequence that nobody is building into their forecasts. You are not a bystander in this story. You are in the building when the negotiation goes wrong.